Hello and welcome to a quick video of a pretty fast overview of Google Analytics. Google Analytics as a program is really imperative for your success in this course. And also it's really helpful for anybody that is looking to work in digital marketing um, as a career path. For me, Google Analytics was really an eye-opening experience when I first learned it many years ago, and being able to not only look at numbers but also use them to tell a story and to drive growth is something that a lot of entry-level digital marketers simply don't have. And so I'm going to try to show this succinctly to you, while also providing you the key tools that you need in order to analyze a website for your final group project. So I'm going to share my screen here, and um, this is Google Analytics itself as it exists today. I'm using the Google Store demo account for this example here. And before I start, there are actually two different types of Google Analytics that exist right now. There is the original Google Analytics, which right now is this thing that you see on the screen. And there's also what they call GA4, Google Analytics 4, which I will also show quickly at the end. And that is more based around real-time numbers and utilizing Google's Data Studio to better visualize the most important numbers for your business. It's also more focused around the idea of conversions and numbers that are dealing with more user engagement and not just every number imaginable. So we'll start with Google Analytics here as an example. Again, this is the Google Store. Right off the bat, I want to manage your expectations. In this course and in many other courses, it's going to be kind of assumed that you can use analytics and see the kind of revenue and the conversion rates that come from various digital marketing activities. And some companies do have that set up, like Google, of course, but honestly, 90% of businesses do not. That's not to say that you need to do that as for this company. Some businesses aren't even advanced enough to understand and to put in place the proper model to set up a good revenue, in order to display the right kind of revenue. Other companies, like certain e-commerce companies, that's the easier way. It's the easier type of business to show straight revenue because it's product. But at the same time, there is a learning curve, and there is a good amount of setup on the front end of Google Analytics that a lot of businesses do not have the time or even the background knowledge to do. And usually when you see revenue and conversion rates, it means that either it's a company like Google that knows what they're doing, or the business has already worked with a marketing agency and specifically a Google Analytics expert to get these set up. A lot of data that Google pulls now is not just through analytics, but it's now through a program called Google Tag Manager, which is better at measuring certain events that take place on a site. In this intro to digital marketing course, you've seen a lot of your basic web numbers, a lot of numbers that you've had to calculate manually. And, I'd say 90% of those can be pulled automatically from Google Analytics today. So let's look in here. I will say, if you are lucky enough to be working with a company that has revenue and conversion rate being actually calculated by Google, definitely take a look at those. But before you really do anything, this is the homepage. This is what Google sets up as their four KPIs, and you can change these based on the business, so you may see different numbers. Google sets users, revenue, conversion rate, and sessions. Sometimes you'll see bounce rate. Sometimes you'll see average time on page. Other times you'll see like pages per session, percentage of new users. It all kind of depends on the type of website and whoever set it up. This is your real-time bank here, traffic acquisition on a regular basis, and all sorts of different visuals as you scroll down. I'm not going to go into everything here today because I want to keep this time brief, but I think you'll be able to see and recognize pretty fast, what is what. This is clearly desktop versus mobile versus tablet. This is straight traffic, active users, people that are taking action on the site, so on and so forth. When it comes to pulling data, I would actually recommend starting with in the audience tab. This is where you can see as much data about the individual users and what their actions are. If you look at the left side tab, you have audience, which is like demographic data, user data. Are they using a phone? Are they using a desktop? Are they using Chrome? Are they using Firefox? Things like that. Acquisition is how the people got to the site. That's going to be an important piece that we'll look at in a moment. And then you have behaviors, which is literally the pages that they go to, where they leave the site, how long, things like that. But to go back to the audience really quick, and before you start pulling numbers, normally I wouldn't mention this in the video, but make sure that your date that you select is going to be the same throughout. Over the years, as I've been teaching this project, without fail, every year there is at least one group that, for whatever reason, does not understand the idea of measuring analytics from a time period. For this class, it's expected to be at least 30 days. It can be more than that. Whatever it is, you need to make sure that it's consistent from the web to social and everything else in between you're measuring. The other thing you need to make sure that you have is that everybody that's analyzing this data knows it. Right now, let's say we're looking at the last quarter of 2021. So that's October 1st to December 31st. That date range may not be there if you leave and come back. You may have to reset the date range. I just want to acknowledge that and to remind you, because if you don't have consistent numbers and consistent data from the same time period, you're going to end up with a lot of inconsistencies, discrepancies, and it can completely torpedo your entire project. So you have your date. Again, under audience is where you're going to get your basic kind of these KPIs that kind of the first few numbers that you saw in the course, right? The student textbook and digital marketing essentials talks first about things like users and sessions. The other thing is Google has their own definitions and their own terminology. So for Google, users is unique visitors. Sessions is total sessions. And new users is how many of these total unique individuals were new in this time frame that you're looking at. That's kind of a quick deep dive. Your average session duration is how long they're on the site. Bounce rate is what percentage of visits on your site are only one page long. This you've seen in the textbook, the bounce rate, they go into some pretty good detail on it. So I'm not going to here, but I will say that bounce rate can be a little misleading. Obviously, you want that to be as low as possible, but there will be instances where it's okay to be higher. It's a landing page, for example, and also bounce rate is a good indicator of how accessible and how strong your UX is and the user experience. Now that doesn't mean that somebody went to your homepage and then went to another page and left. It means literally one page visit. So really your bounce rate is partially dependent on the expectation that the user had when they come to your site. Case in point, your homepage should absolutely have one of the lowest bounce rates on your site, because that's meant you want people to go elsewhere and see what else you have to offer. Now, if somebody comes to your homepage and it's like, oh, this is not what I expected, this is not what I like, this is not what I wanted to see, then they'll leave. You don't want that. But also, a lot of times you have pages that perform really well with search engines that get a lot of quick traffic that have high bounce rates. And that's because people come to a page, come to your site, they're looking for one specific piece of information, they get it, and then they leave. Again, not necessarily that bad of an issue, but at the same time, you can take actions and you can look at that data and figure out, okay, how do we improve this? How do we make it so that people come to our site, they see what they're looking for, and how do we keep them here? How do we get them to take more action, look around, and maybe fill out a lead form, make a purchase, whatever it is that your website exists for. And another thing too is on, you have average session duration, which is how long people are on the site. And then you also have average time on page, which is a behavior number. Sometimes you may see that an individual page's average time on page is longer than your average session duration. And that is because there is a fundamental flaw in the way that those numbers are pulled. If you think about the way that Google gets these numbers, it's based on the activities that you, the web searcher, the web user, are taking. For example, for Google to properly count you as a user or a session, a certain amount of code needs to load on the website. If you open up a new browser and you go to wayne.edu and you quickly X out before anything loads, that does not count as a session, as a user, as anything. If you wait long enough for everything to load and then you X out, then you're going to count as that user. Now, at the same time, the way that average time on page is calculated is based on how, you would think it's calculated by, okay, I'm on the page, and then after a minute, I go to another page, the end. Which is all well and good, except when you look at average time on site, that average time on site is going to be based on a myriad of other factors that can be convoluted, including the idea of leaving a web page open and walking away. Sometimes, I don't remember what the exact number is, but right now, Google has a number set, and I think you can customize this, that if you open up a web page and you walk away, after X amount of minutes, I believe it's 30, Google is going to stop timing the time that was on that page on that site, and it's going to restart. So there's a lot of different behaviors that we as web users take that Google can struggle to properly measure. And as a result, these numbers are not always the most accurate. Be that as it may, I'm not going to hold you to that for this project. I think you just should use the numbers that are presented to you and take them at face value. But I did want to share that information in case you run into one of those situations. Because, if you are if you go to the homepage of your business's website and, you're called off to the phone, or you got to do something around the house, or you're leaving, you could be sitting on that page for a long time. And Google doesn't know that you've left or that you're not doing it. So the behaviors and the user experience is absolutely pivotal in Google Analytics. So, otherwise, there's not a ton here under audience. I do like to look at the demographic data, but you should know that this is generally an approximation. Google doesn't, I mean, Google probably knows all of your data, but this is not this is not actually factual. They are triangulating as much data about these anonymous users as possible and putting them into a demographic age bucket. That's not to say you can't use it. You can still use this if you wish. I'm just saying that when you look at overview, age, and gender, I wouldn't use this data to make any sweeping decisions on the strategy. I think this is more of a supporting point. The same goes for interests. You're looking at Google measuring, again, what people's search habits are really. But on the flip side of that, geography is very, very accurate. This is languages, but if you go under location, you're going to see metro area. Well, I guess countries. You can click on a country and drill down and see more. So you're looking at statewide. This usually is pretty accurate. Obviously, you could use a VPN, you can scramble your location, yes, but very few people actually do that when they're on a site such as the one that you're going to be studying. If there's one other thing to really look at under audience, it should be under mobile. You really want to get a good understanding of the way that users are perusing your site. And internet-wide, generally desktop and mobile are about at 50-50 right now. It was 80-20 desktop 10 years ago. It's 50-50 now. It's been 50-50 for a few years. There's different schools of thought on whether or not mobile will take over for desktop. Some people think it already has. Every site I have ever seen has been fairly even, or desktop's actually been above. Now, what this means for your site is that if you go and you look at this page and you see that mobile traffic is way greater than desktop, the first thing you should be doing is looking at this company's website on your phone and making sure that everything important is there and that the site looks good. The way that small businesses work these days is that, yes, if they get the right developer or they hire the right brain trust, they'll have a good mobile website. Problem is, if they don't and they just outsource it to one person who doesn't really know what they're doing in terms of the mobile side, that's where you could run into some issues. And issues with mobile design leads to issues with appearing on search engines, and that therefore leading to issues with generating more traffic. So that's really important here in this area to see the breakdown. The Google Store, 63-35 desktop versus mobile. I think a lot of this class's businesses are going to fall in a similar range here. There's other things you can look at, which is fun, but again, we'll keep moving on. So if we go to acquisition now, I would expect every group to have some acquisition data, or at least mention it and talk about it in their presentation. This is how people get to the site. Direct traffic, of course, you're typing in the URL, typing in the address. Paid search, so that's your Google ads, your Bing ads. Display advertising, you're not going to see a lot of this. I'm surprised that Google is that high up. That's like your banner ads. There's also display advertising on Google. Affiliates is something that you're not probably going to see, but this is traffic generated by affiliate websites. Think of Amazon, for example. You can be an Amazon affiliate and sell other people's Amazon products on your site, write content about it, promote it. Then when people go from your site to the Amazon store, right, and they buy something, you as the affiliate marketer, you get a commission for it. Again, this is not something you're going to probably run into. You'll see referral traffic, so that's from other websites. And then there's two things, obviously, that are missing here. There's organic search. How many people Googled the site or found it, or just found it generally through SEO. And then there's organic social media, really just social media. organic search is going to be a pretty big one for most companies that you all are studying. A lot of the way that behaviors have gone lately is that rather than even typing in a URL, people actually forget them, and as a result, they just Google the name of the company. Too lazy to type it into the address bar, or even if they do type it into the address bar, they'll just type the name, which will then take them to a search engine. So if you have an overwhelming amount of organic search traffic, you don't want to jump to the conclusion that they're really good at SEO. That requires a couple other levels of dissecting the analytics, which I don't think we're going to get into today, but just don't jump to that conclusion. Social media, of course, because it's not here, the Google store does not really only exist in a paid search and affiliate marketing world. It doesn't really exist in the organic search and the social media world. So that explains why there's no traffic coming in. If you want to look at it a little bit more broken down, you can look under the source/medium to see exactly like what these are that we see, and then also the referring websites. Right, these are all Google. If there's a Google ad account, you can also see the various paid search campaigns that are currently live, and you can see the number of clicks, how much they cost per click, users, etc. If you are planning on reviewing a Google Ads account as part of your final project, I recommend reaching out to me separately so we can discuss kind of the best ways to go about it. It's something that we aren't going to have the time to really get into. There is going to be time in class to talk about this. Google Ads will be a topic. But in terms of looking at something like this and being able to provide an informed strategy as a result, that's something that this course is not really equipped to do because it is an introductory course. So really quick too, keywords are what people are searching to land on your site, specifically from Google Ads. Finally, I did want to talk quickly about behavior. Again, that's the actions that people are taking on the site. This is where you see the average time on page is 49 seconds. Your bounce rate, you have your exit rate as well. I do want to remind you that exit rate is like the percentage of times that somebody actually is leaving the site in general. So for example, if you go to the home page and then you go to an about page and then you go to a product page and then you leave, the exit, this number, this metric happened on that last page. A bounce rate, again, is when you leave the site after one single page. So, it's an interesting breakdown of the data. If you want to see the top pages, go under site content. You see it there already, but you can see a further breakdown. And this is where you can see some interesting things. Do you see any outliers in terms of the average time on page? Do you see any outliers even on this list? For the first time I ever saw successful SEO was by accident. I was looking at analytics and I saw this random landing page that I'd literally never promoted before for the business I was at, bringing in thousands of views a week. And I realized it was all from search. And it was because it ranked number one. Again, this is 10 years ago, very much by accident. It was ranking number one for a term that got like 50,000 searches a day, like a ton. And as a result, we got a lot of traffic, but it wasn't until I actually saw it here that I actually recognized it. When I did, I then took some action and tried to best optimize the page for all of that additional traffic that was coming through. One other quick thing to look at is site speed. under behavior, and this is how long it takes a page to load for a user. This is very fast. I would imagine that a lot of groups in this intro to digital marketing course are going to see an average page load time of about twice or 3 times this number. And that's bad. Google uses average page load time as one of their main, or what they call core web vitals, to assess the usability and ultimately the ranking, the ability to rank, the ranking potential of a site on a search engine results page. There's a lot of back and forth about what that threshold is. I personally say that as long as you can keep your page load time to between 2 and 3 seconds, you're good. I mean, 3.5 seconds, like the Google store here is, it's fine. That's not that bad. But when you get into 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds of load time, you have a slow loading site, and you as the analyst have something you can very easily point to as a, first off, as a red flag in the audit, but then secondly, as a recommendation to improve. I would recommend looking a little bit further in the text about what those improvements can be, but I can tell you number one is usually really big images exist on the page, and it can be that a lot of times that page load time can be fixed by either removing the images or by compressing them so that they're more manageable size. That kind of wraps up the overview of Google Analytics. And I did want to really quickly look at GA4, because some of you will have GA4 and you see it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more condensed. Honestly, if a company has GA4, they probably have some good engagement numbers to share with you. And for me, I personally, I like GA4. The only problem is that I don't have access to quite as many numbers as I did in the original Google Analytics. And as somebody who's been a legacy Google Analytics user, there's certain deep analytics that I like to pull because it gives me certain insights that GA4 doesn't have. But that's okay if you have GA4, just use what you have available to you here. Again, you probably aren't going to see total revenue. But here's a new stat. Average engagement time, not time on site, not time on page, but engagement time. And that is how long they are actively consuming content on the page. The way that you see my mouse move around, right? That is an engagement. Again, I don't know what the cutoff is here, but if I just left my mouse here and started reading, eventually I'm going to move, right? I'm either going to use the scroll and go down. I might, fidget, move around. But after a couple of minutes, Google's no longer going to consider me an active, engaged user if I don't move my mouse. It's that simple. On mobile, it's the same thing in terms of, using your thumb or your finger to scroll up and down. Again, these sections are all personal, can all be customized. So what you're seeing here is probably not what you're going to see on the GA4 for your site. You'll probably still see the user activity. You'll probably still see the top pages. And honestly, you're probably going to see the real-time user block. But a lot of these other ones are completely random. They could be completely random. The other thing to know is that, so GA4 originally last year or 2 years ago when it went live, it was only available to larger businesses and it had to be requested. Now Google is rolling them out to all businesses, to all accounts. Most businesses have a GA4 view. And if they don't, then they've just been sticking with original Google Analytics. But a lot of companies that actually use GA4 and actually like use it for analysis, they've spent some time optimizing this view and capitalizing on the simplicity that GA4 tries to provide. So I will say, looking at these, as I mentioned before, like monetization is going to be really hard for almost all of your business websites. If you can figure out a way to do it, if you can properly set it up for an e-commerce company, that's great, and that's absolutely helpful in terms of forecasting and seeing what's working. You could get to a point where you could legitimately drive revenue by recognizing and fixing single small things on Google Analytics. Again, that's more of the exception and not the norm. And honestly, if you are finding a company that has gone as far as to set up all that revenue, they probably have already started looking at all of those discrepancies as well. But that's really about it. I'm not going to go into each one of these. A lot of it is just duplicating efforts and what I've been saying, and I think I've been talking for long enough here today. So make sure to spend a good amount of time on Google Analytics, looking at the data, and make sure to reach out if you do have any questions. While I don't really subscribe to the idea of like walking individuals through numbers, I am happy to provide further detail on any figures that you might consider to be standing out, might be an outlier. And I'm happy to kind of go through my thought process for why a metric is the way it is, and how it can be improved upon, and what that leads to being improved upon for future growth. So that's all for today. I'm happy to help with any other questions, but this should help you in terms of setting up for your final project. And I look forward to seeing all of the analysis that you and your groups do.